Hello, everyone, and welcome to SIG scheduling meeting. My name is Bobby Salamat. I'm one of the leads of SIG scheduling. If you're not familiar with me, and Klaus is also here, who is lead of the SIG. So I would like to start today's meeting with a couple of sort of like reminders and / announcements about feature freeze and code freeze for 1.16. So as I put these dates in our meeting notes, the feature freeze for 1.16 is July 30th. So basically the end of this month, the end of the coming month, July is going to be the end of, is going to be the feature freeze. What it means is that all the enhancement issues must be filed by that day, and all the KEPs must be merged. If we miss this deadline, the feature may not get into 1.16 unless we make an exception on all, and we don't want to go through all the extra steps for making an exception. So please, if you have a feature that you feel that should be in 1.16, make sure that the KEPs are merged by that day. Code freeze for 1.16 is close to the end of August. It's August 29th. That's something that has existed for a long time, so hopefully most of you are familiar with. Code freeze means that all the PRs for implementing features must be merged by that day. That's about the two important dates. Is there any question about any of these feature freezes or code freeze dates? All right. I have a couple of updates regarding some of the new changes in the scheduler. One is volume limits code is merged. So this is a new change that removes, or at least help us remove eventually, all the cloud provider specific code with respect to the number of volumes that can be attached to a node. In the past, actually even today, in 1.15, we have some hard-coded numbers for some of these like more famous cloud providers on the number of volumes that can be attached to a node. We were not so happy with this piece of code because it was not expandable and it was not scalable as new cloud providers or some other users were using Kubernetes. They had to go and make changes. So we are removing that piece of code, and instead we are bringing the new changes, which is in new CSI drivers, to Kubernetes, Kubernetes scheduler in particular. This new change basically tells the scheduler how many volumes can be attached to a node, and this is coming from the CSI node driver on a node. This is great because we no longer need to make any like hard-coded, have any hard-coded code inside our code base, and hopefully this will work well for all cloud providers that implement CSI. And CSI is Container Storage Interface, I believe, and it's a standard storage interface for basically giving information about storage properties, including the number of volumes that can be attached to nodes. Okay, so is there any question about this? There is some other changes with respect to...
Just one question. Do we have any other like provider-specific code in the scheduler after this has been merged?
I don't think so. At least I do not recall any other thing. Klaus, you can correct me, or any other folks in the meeting, you can correct me if I'm wrong. I don't remember any other cloud-specific code, any cloud provider-specific code in the scheduler. Yeah, so there is a number of PRs for making changes or implementing extension points for the scheduler. One which is kind of blocking some other PRs is building filter extension points. I've had some discussions about how to implement filter extension points with the author of the PR. I will add the links to the meeting notes. But basically, the implementation of that PR was problematic in some ways, in my opinion. This could be actually subjective, and some people may like the way it's implemented, but I felt like it was not the cleanest way of implementing it, particularly because um, this one was replicating or duplicating the code that parallelizes running predicates for each node in the framework as well for running filter plugins. And I didn't like that for this reason, as well as some other stuff or logic that was added to a function that we have called find nodes that fit. And I asked the author to change it. I actually didn't check today. This is the update from yesterday. I didn't check today if there is changes to the PR, but I believe we need to make that change before merging it. And I know that there are a number of other PRs waiting to be merged. There was one particular problem with respect to tests that made us revert bind extension points, and that Abdullah was able to identify the actual problem with the test, which was basically sharing the state among tests. And there was Draven has sent us a PR, has sent a PR that fixes that problem. Hopefully, after that one is merged, if it's not already merged, we can have the bind extension point again. I know that Abdullah, you've made a score extension point, so that needs a review, right? Another round, basically.
Yeah, so the initial one was just the interface, but I thought that you're generally okay with the interface, so I thought just like, okay, do the whole implementation of the same PR.
Yeah, sounds good. So, so particularly with respect to score and filter, my ideal. Right, so this is just the model that I have in my head. It does not necessarily be backed by any rational or scientific reasons. The model that I have in my head is that parallelism of how to run basically these scoring or filter plugins should be done in the scheduler, not in the run function for plugins. So basically, we have like a bunch of maybe a piece of code that starts go routine per node, and that go routine calls these framework functions. So that's how I feel it should be done, both for filter and score plugins. I don't know if you guys have any other preference or believe that that should be done. Actually, the parallelism or running or creating these Go routines should be done by the framework and the run function of the framework. Is there any particular reason that you may prefer the latter?
I think it's, I guess the way I see it is that what is at this point was the easiest to integrate with what we have. So that was, I think, my main, like, I agree with you generally that it should be that way. But I don't know if we need to do like major refactoring of the current code. I don't know if that requires major refactoring of the current code to do it, like to do like a, parallelism in the outer loop rather than inside.
I don't think so. At least for filter plugins, I feel like it's relatively easy to find nodes that fit, which is this function that runs all these predicates, to also run the plugins for us. For scoring, I'm not 100% sure. I have to go and refresh my mind about how exactly the code runs these score plugins or score or like priority functions, not score plugins. Priority
yeah, there's a priority function that iterates in parallel over, like we already have like a couple of parallel loops there anyways. One for the I think the old approach for implementing these scoring functions, and then the new one, which is based on MapReduce.
Yes.
So it didn't, like, I mean, from my first look, it didn't feel like it was easy, but I can take another look and see if there is but I agree with you, that should be out. So we shouldn't have multiple right. Parallel loops running. Yeah.
Correct. So the MapReduce model is essentially changed in the framework into scoring and post-scoring plugins, basically, or normalized scoring, something like that. I don't know exactly what the name we have put on the extension points, but anyways, there is this phase that we score all the nodes, and then the next phase we go and normalize the scores on the nodes. This is essentially equivalent to that MapReduce model in the code. And I have a feeling that it should be relatively easy to replace that with a new mechanism, but I have to check. And actually, I have to go and look at the PR that you sent to see.
Yeah, I mean, moving everything from the MapReduce pattern to this should be easy. Yeah. Even the older one. I mean, the older. So I have something in my to-do list is basically to do like a laundry list of all the pieces that we have in the framework that needs to be translated into plugins.
Okay.
And then maybe try to create, issues for each one of them and see if we can make progress on that in the next couple months.
Yeah, that would be great, actually. If we can convert a majority of our priority and predicate functions into plugins in 1.16, that'll be an important achievement. That would be great. If you have already figured those out, it'll be awesome if you can file issues for them. Thank you so much. All right.
I have a few questions. Yes. Bobby, what's the reason for having the parallelism in the core scheduler instead of having it in the framework? Like, what is the advantage, or what is the reason behind it?
Yeah. If we, I don't know if you paid enough attention to my first sentence when I started that statement, was that I don't have very strong reasons for this, but one thing that I feel it's a better approach is that the framework should be responsible for running plugins per node. That's how the rest of the extension points are. And all these other run functions for the framework just get a pod and a node. If we want to build the parallelism inside the framework and inside those run functions, some of these functions, particularly the filter and the scoring functions, should get a slice of nodes as opposed to just a node. Another thing is that I have a feeling that if we go that path, then in the future we may have to integrate other logic. For example, how to iterate over nodes and stuff like that in the framework, which may not necessarily be a perfect match for the framework, at least in today's model, where we have like a framework and like a scheduler that uses this framework to run plugins. Today, the model is that the framework is only responsible for running plugins, and I would prefer to keep it that way as much as possible. Basically, the sole responsibility of the framework is to run a plugin for a node given a pod. So that's basically my model for the framework functions at this point. And if we want to bring parallelism to the framework, we're going to break this model for some extension points.
Yeah, I understand that. But say if in future we have a plugin that is similar to our extender that we have in that is over HTTP after the filtering or prioritization stage goes over. So in the current state or in the current code base, it is actually expecting a node list. And say if someone tells that, okay, I have written a framework and I'm trying to compare it with the existing Kubernetes scheduler framework that we have currently, it will not be an apples to comparison because the parallelism is outside of the plugin framework that we have currently, right? So how can someone tell that, okay, I have written something that is better than the existing one or something like that?
So when it comes to external plugins, similar to like those in Extender, we can't afford calling these plugins many times for a single pod. So if, for example, in that model, if you wanted to, for a pod, if you wanted to call some of these extenders per node, you would have had to call the extenders, for example, 1,000 times per pod if you had like 10,000, if you had 1,000 nodes in your cluster. So in that model, it's better to pass all the nodes to the extender in a single pass, as opposed to the framework, which is like an in-process plugin. So in this model, I feel it's going to be a simpler version if plugins don't worry about like iterating over nodes, and if they only focus on a single node. They can still share a state via the plugin context if they need to share a state as they are called for various nodes. So plugins can be stateful. They can have state in their own instance, as well as they can pass the state in the plugin context to other plugins. So I feel we don't really in the in-process model, we don't really need to pass a slice of nodes as we have to do in the extender model.
Yeah, I get that. The second part of the question is, say if someone writes a plugin, how can they tell that it is better than the existing one if the parallelism or something related to performance is outside of the plugin?
So the parallelism, first of all, the parallelism should never be inside the plugins, in my opinion. So, right? So I mean, why should a plugin?
Someone writes a filter plugin, and then how can they tell that it's better than the existing one or something like that? I'm just giving a random example.
So. What do you mean by if it is better than existing ones? Of course, you can still go and optimize your plugin for a single node.
Yeah, but should we pass the slice versus should we pass the node is the question that I'm asking. Like, if we have the parallelism in there within the plugin, they can tell that it's an apples to apples comparison.
Well, first of all, we never even in the model that I described, we never pass a slice of nodes to plugins.
I get
so that was only passing a slice of nodes to the framework or the run function of the framework, which is actually an internal function for the scheduler to run these plugins per node. Still in that model, the plugins are called per node. We never actually discussed passing a slice of nodes to plugins directly. It's just passing a slice of node to the framework, and then the framework calls those plugins one at a time per node. That interface is not going to change, and that one is even worse than what I am actually arguing for. So that one is horrible because then each plugin have to take care of all the parallelism and how they want to deal with parallelism, and some may decide not to parallelize at all, and all that stuff, which is going to be like really bad. And I mean, over time, it could create a huge mess, and we need to replicate a lot of logic of parallelism inside each plugin as opposed to just having it once in the scheduler, right? So that model of passing like a slice of node to plugins is definitely not recommended. But what we were talking about was just passing a slice to the framework.
Okay.
Does it make sense? I mean,
yeah.
You see why it's really bad if each plugin wants to replicate all the parallelism?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, sure. All right. So much about the framework. What if you have more questions about that? Please go ahead and share them with us. Okay. I guess that's all the updates that I have. If you have, one more thing is that next Thursday, is a holiday in the US, so we're not going to have any SIG scheduling meeting next week. With that, that's all the updates that I have for you guys. Is there any other questions or comments?
Yeah, I have one question. Do we need to refactor the predicates by the end of this release?
That's something that would be great if we can do. At least, if not all predicates, at least I hope we can refactor majority of them into filter plugins.
Okay, I thought it was in the stable phase.
That is right. Sometimes we push it a little bit and we try to get ahead of ourselves in a way. It'll never hurt if we can get to some of the goals for the next release, if we can reasonably and reliably deliver them in an earlier release.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I think it's good if we have like a few at least, just to, because I don't think we've tested the framework yet, right? We don't have any plugins implemented. So it'd be nice if we have few.
Yes, exactly, to soak the framework a bit, make sure it works before we actually graduate it into GA. And if there is any flaws in the design or implementation, having some plugins will help us remove those and fix them.
Yeah, the other thing that I would like to know is, are we having any performance numbers with every PR that we are creating for the framework? I think just to have some sort of comparison.
No, we don't. But what I almost always do is that I keep looking at our dashboard, perf dashboard, to make sure that we don't see any regression, any performance regression. And so far, I haven't seen any. But as we go forward and as we add plugins, because right now the framework is essentially without plugins doesn't do much really. It's very unlikely that unless there is a really bad implementation that you have missed, it shouldn't really cause any performance degradation. It basically just skips all the logic. It just goes and iterates over plugins, and since there's no plugin, it does nothing. So far we haven't seen any performance regression, but you have a good point. Once we start building these plugins, we must make sure that we don't see any regression, or if we see, they are within a reasonable number. All right. Any other questions or comments?
I have another question for the scheduling integration test. I add reset functions to all the test plugins, but these tests are also share states. So is it necessary to create an individual scheduler for each test which run in the framework's integration test?
I see. So yeah, I can hear you. So that I don't know if that could be achieved easily. These are integration tests, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I guess that's one option. We can. I'm thinking that that's one way of doing it. The other, which is not as clean, is to recreate these plugins, sort of. So what you're saying is that the scheduler itself shares a state with other tests. Is that right? Or is it just the plugins?
It's just the plugins.
I see.
Yeah.
If it's just the plugins, one other way is to just recreate these plugins. But your solution looks simpler and cleaner to me. So if it's, I mean, we can definitely create a new scheduler and pass new plugins to it per test.
Yeah, like there are testing frameworks where you set up and tear down for each test. And I feel that this should be the way that we do it. Like we set up and tear down everything for each test so that we're sure starting from a clean slate every time a test is run.
Yeah.
I don't know if we can use Django or something like that there.
I mean, a bunch of our integration tests already do this. So basically, they just start everything and tear down everything at the end. So we can just follow the same model.
I think I'll send a PR for this, and let's see what if it will work.
Okay, you already sent the PR.
I sent a PR to add reset functions, but
yes,
not.
I have seen that PR. Yes, yeah, but I've seen that. What you're saying that PR does not solve the problem completely, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, if I know that your PR is out, and I saw that there was actually a failure. I wasn't so sure. I couldn't actually see the errors for some reason. It was not showing me in the prog. But if you have been able to figure out what the problem is, and if that's and if the reason is that we are sharing the state, yes, please go ahead. Maybe change that PR to recreate these scheduler and the master per test. So
Okay.
basically, we have other similar integration tests that set up the test environment and tear it down in a defer function.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you for your help. And thank you for many other PRs that you've sent. I appreciate your help. All right. Is there any other questions or comments? We have 2 more minutes left.
Is there any way we can make this meeting at a little bit earlier time?
Okay, earlier or later? Does later work for you?
So it's 8 p.m. my time now.
Yes.
Later would be
even worse. Sometimes, okay, the reason that I said later, because sometimes people don't like 8 p.m. It's like a lunch / family, I'm sorry, dinner / family time for them. And sometimes they prefer like later at night, like 10 p.m. or whatever. But one other option, you know, it's already like 8 a.m. in China, and this is
okay.
Yeah, this is meant to be a China-friendly meeting. But one other option is to have this earlier in the day. I don't know how it's going to work for folks in China, but for example, if it is like 7 a.m., I think it's going to be like 8 p.m. in China or something like that, I guess.
I mean, I guess we need, yeah, I don't want to be unfair to the other time zone because we already have the other meeting at 1 p.m., right?
Yes.
So, but I agree, like the other suggestions to having it a little bit later is also probably also better like than 8 p.m. But let's see, let's try a few times and then maybe we can decide later.
Yeah. So, but by trying a few times, you mean try having it at the same time? And
yeah, just keep it as it is and see, like maybe maybe later we will change it like to a little bit later. So probably be better for people in China as well. It is like at 9 or 11 their time.
Yes, I think later will work better for those folks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All right. Thank you very much for attending. If you don't have any other questions or comments, we can end this meeting now. All right. Thanks, everybody. See you in 2 weeks.
Okay.
Bye.